Chapter 7 Maneuvering. Overview. This chapter discusses how to seize advantageous conditions in order to gain the initiative in warfare. Those who can occupy favorable terrain and seize the right moments in battle will create a situation that benefits their own forces. In this chapter, Sun Tzu introduces the strategy of maneuvering as the core, emphasizing the idea of those who move later can arrive first, highlighting the value of strategic flexibility. How can one seize the initiative in warfare? Sun Tzu outlines 5 key requirements. 1. Strategic awareness. One must first understand the political trends of the rival states, become familiar with the terrain, and employ reliable guides to gain full clarity on the situation. 2. Unified action. All units must act in unison and remain in step. The army should move as swiftly as the wind, as quietly as the forest, as fiercely as fire when raiding, and as immovable as a mountain when holding position. No brave soldier should advance alone, and no timid one should retreat on their own. 3. Effective and flexible command. Leadership must be precise and adaptable. It is essential to avoid the enemy's strong momentum and strike when their spirit has waned. 4. Psychological strategy. Tactics should be based on the enemy's psychological condition. The principles are: wait in order when the enemy is in chaos, stay calm when the enemy is noisy, and wait nearby when the enemy is far, wait well rested when the enemy is exhausted, wait well fed when the enemy is hungry. 5. Tactical deception and variability. There can never be too much deception in war. To hold the initiative and achieve victory, one must skillfully use changes, illusion and reality, truth and falsehood, employing a range of stratagems that confuse the enemy, conceal true intentions, and ultimately win through surprise. Only by mastering these elements can one maintain an advantageous position in warfare. 1. Turning indirect paths into strategic advantage. Sun Tzu said, "The general rule in the conduct of war is that once the commander receives the sovereign's orders, he must raise and organize the troops, mobilize the people, and form a structured army before marching to the battlefield and setting up camp in opposition to the enemy. Among all these steps, nothing is more difficult than seizing the advantage of the right moment and position, what is known as military contest for initiative." The difficulty in military contests for initiative lies in transforming circuitous routes into direct ones and turning dangers and disadvantages into opportunities. Therefore, one must often take indirect routes and use minor enticements to lure the enemy. In doing so, even if our forces depart later than the enemy, we may arrive first at the battlefield. Such is the strategy of one who masters indirect and direct methods. Reflections. In warfare, if one can seize advantageous terrain and grasp favorable timing ahead of the enemy, it becomes possible to create a situation conducive to victory. Sun Tzu employed reverse thinking, proposing the strategy of using the indirect to control the direct, and emphasized the idea of those who move later may arrive earlier. The so-called distant but empty refers to situations where, although an objective seems far, if the enemy is unprepared, our forces can advance easily and swiftly, making it effectively near. Conversely, the near but solid means that if the enemy is well prepared, our forces will find it hard to advance, lack mobility, and require more time, thus making it effectively distant. Therefore, on the battlefield, one must analyze the situation well and dare to break conventions in order to achieve unexpected results, deploying later than the enemy but arriving first, turning disadvantage into advantage. In the 29th year of King Hui I of Zhao during the Warring States period, 270 BCE, Qin accelerated its advance into the Central Plains and besieged the strategic Zhao city of Ayu. The two sides were locked in a stalemate. Generals Lianpe and Lucheng both believed the city could not be saved. The king of Zhao appointed Zhao Shi as the commander to lead the army for the rescue mission. Zhao Shi stationed his troops 30 li, about 15 kilometers, from Handan and issued a strict order: anyone who discusses military matters or suggests advancing will be executed on the spot. From then on, no matter how much the Qin army provoked or challenged, Zhao Shi remained behind the defenses without responding. At one point, a military officer in Zhao's army spoke about engaging in battle and was executed. After 28 days, Zhao's army built an additional fortification. When the Qin sent spies to gather intelligence, Zhao Shi treated them with courtesy. The Qin general then believed Zhao Shi was focused on reinforcing defenses rather than planning a rescue. Zhao Shi waited until the Qin forces relaxed their guard and then immediately ordered a rapid march to relieve the siege of Ayu. The Zhao army traveled day and night, secretly passing through Qin territory, and arrived at Ayu within 24 hours. Zhao Shi stationed skilled archers 50 li, 25 kilometers, outside of Ayu and followed the advice of a subordinate Su Li to occupy Beishan, North Mountain, near the city. When the Qin army arrived, Zhao's forces attacked from both inside and outside the city. The Qin soldiers and horses fell into chaos, suffering heavy casualties. Seeing his troops losing morale, the Qin general Hu Yang ordered a full retreat. 2. The double-edged sword of seizing the initiative. To seize advantageous ground early is both beneficial and dangerous. If the entire army advances toward the objective while burdened with heavy equipment and supplies, it will fail to arrive in time. If the troops abandon their baggage and rush ahead, then the supplies will be lost. Therefore, when soldiers march in full armor, travel light, and press on day and night to cover 100 li in pursuit of advantage, the entire force risks being captured. Only the strongest troops will arrive early, while the weary fall behind, and in the end, merely 1/10 of the army will make it. If the march is 50 li, the vanguard may suffer losses and only half will arrive. If 30 li, only 2/3 may arrive on time. Thus, without supply wagons, the army fails. Without provisions, it cannot survive, and without reserves, it cannot endure. Reflections. Everything has both advantages and disadvantages. Benefits and drawbacks are always intertwined in the course of a matter's development. Sun Tzu's statement, "Military operations involve both profit and peril," reflects this dialectical way of thinking. When all preparations are made thoroughly, it may slow down the speed of military action, whereas advancing with a light load requires abandoning a large amount of equipment. Both choices come with their own gains and losses. Sun Tzu here profoundly reveals the dependency of warfare on rear-line supplies. Logistics, food, and materials mainly come from production and commerce. Fan Li of the Yu state promoted trade. Guanzhong of Qi developed the salt industry. Chao Qiuo of the Han dynasty reaped profits from salt and iron. Liu Bang painstakingly built up wealth in Hanzhong, and Zhuge Liang leveraged the benefits of brocade production, all aimed at preparing sufficient supplies for the army to ensure victory in war. On the other hand, destroying the enemy's material foundation is also a key factor in securing one's own success. Emperor I of Sui, Yang Jian, when planning to conquer the southern Qin dynasty, divided the war into 2 stages: military operations and economic attrition. First came the material warfare. During the Qin state's planting or harvest seasons, Sui forces would stage small-scale attacks, prompting Qin soldiers and civilians to drop their farming tools and take up arms in preparation for battle. Once Qin forces were mobilized, the Sui troops would swiftly withdraw. As a result, Qin's agricultural schedule was repeatedly disrupted, drastically reducing food production. The demands of military readiness further drained their tools and stored materials. After 7 continuous years, the Qin state's resources were exhausted. The entire population fell into a crisis, without food to eat, clothes to wear, or tools to use. Meanwhile, the Sui dynasty had been actively developing its production and bolstering military strength, resulting in a well-supplied elite army. In early 589 AD, the Sui launched a full-scale offensive against the Qin, and in just 4 months, the Qin dynasty was brought to an end. 3. The foundations of war: deception, advantage, and tactical flexibility. Therefore, one who does not understand the strategic intentions of the feudal lords cannot form alliances with them. one who is unfamiliar with the terrain, its forests, mountains, marshes, and obstacles, cannot conduct effective marches, and one who does not employ local guides cannot achieve victory. Success in warfare depends on the strategic use of deception and flexibility. One must act in accordance with advantageous circumstances and alter tactics based on whether the situation calls for dispersing or concentrating forces. Reflections. All warfare is based on deception. Sun Tzu believed that in order to seize the initiative and achieve victory in warfare, one must be adept at using clever and unpredictable strategies, employing both truth and illusion, reality and feints, to mislead the enemy, obscure one's true intentions, and ultimately win by surprise. Sun Bin's strategy of reducing cooking stoves to defeat Pang One is a classic example of this principle. In 342 BC, the powerful state of Wei attempted to dominate the region by attacking the weaker state of Han. Unable to resist Wei's military strength, Han sought help from the state of Qi. Upon hearing Han's plea, King Xian of Qi immediately dispatched his generals, Tianji and Sun Bin, to lead a large army to assist. Sun Bin, a brilliant and resourceful strategist, devised a clever plan. Instead of going to Han's aid directly, he led his forces to launch a surprise attack on Wei itself. At that time, Wei's army, led by General Pang Wan, was already deep in Han territory. When Pang had just established his position, he received an urgent royal decree commanding him to immediately return home to defend against Tianji and Sun Bin's assault. Pang promptly reversed course and marched day and night to get back to Wei. After returning, Pang Wan scouted Qi's army and found that they had already encamped near the Wei border, occupying a large area. Cooking stoves for the soldiers were scattered throughout the land. Upon counting them, he estimated provisions for over 100,000 troops. Shocked, Pang was paralyzed with fear and dared not take immediate action. Sun Bin, knowing Pang had rushed back from Han and had investigated Qi's troop movements, began to deliberately retreat. On the second day, Pang pursued them to their next camp and counted the cooking stoves again, this time enough for only 50,000 men. On the third day, the Qi army had withdrawn further. When Pang reached their new camp, he found only enough stoves for 30,000 troops. Relaxed and pleased, Pang said, "I knew the Qi army was cowardly and would not face me in battle. We've only just returned, and half their forces have already fled." Now overconfident, Pang let his guard down and led only an elite detachment in pursuit of the Qi forces, marching through the night. They eventually reached Meiling, modern-day southeast Daming County, Hebei Province, as night fell. Sun Bin, having calculated Pang's pursuit speed, anticipated the Wei troops would arrive at Meiling after dark. He ordered tens of thousands of crossbowmen to hide on both sides of the narrow pass, ready to ambush. As Pang's army moved into the path, scouts reported, "General, the mountain path ahead is blocked by fallen trees." Pang advanced to check, and indeed saw that large trees had been chopped down and strewn across the road, with only one standing tree left by the roadside. Its bark had been stripped, revealing faint writing. He immediately ordered his soldiers to light torches. By the firelight, the writing on the pale tree trunk became clear. "Pang Wan will die beneath this tree." Startled, Pang realized he had fallen into a trap. He ordered a retreat at once, but at that moment, the Qi troops launched a full-scale ambush. Thousands of arrows rained down as cries of war filled the night. The Wei army was completely annihilated. This was Sun Bin's ingenious stratagem. By deliberately reducing the number of cooking stoves each day, he lured Pang Wan into believing the Qi army was retreating and weak, inducing overconfidence. Sun then staged a deadly ambush at Meiling, springing the trap just as the fire revealed the warning on the tree. With no way out, Pang Wan drew his sword and took his own life. 4. The art of adaptive warfare. When the army moves swiftly, it should resemble a sudden gust of wind. When it moves steadily, it should be as orderly as a dense, immovable forest. When attacking, strike like blazing fire. When defending, remain firm like an immovable mountain. When concealing, be like heavy clouds hiding the sun and moon. When advancing, strike like a thunderbolt. Divide your forces to plunder the enemy's villages and towns, dispatch detachments to guard strategic points, expand your influence, weigh benefits and losses, and act when the time is right. A commander who understands a method of turning the indirect into the direct path will seize victory. This is the principle of securing the conditions for success. Reflections. Sun Tzu once again emphasizes the importance of understanding the strategy of indirect and direct approaches. In warfare, regardless of the strategy employed, the key lies in accurately assessing the situation, weighing the pros and cons, and taking decisive action based on thorough analysis. By using the indirect as the direct and retreating in order to advance, one can achieve victory in war. In actual military operations, it is often through sacrificing minor interests that we gain greater initiative and ultimate success. 5. The morale of troops can be taken, and the will of a general can be broken. As stated in The Principles of Military Governance, voices cannot be heard in the chaos of battle, so drums and gongs are used. Sights cannot be seen clearly, so banners and flags are employed. Drums and flags are used to unify the senses of hearing and sight among troops. Once the soldiers' sensory focus is aligned, the daring cannot charge ahead on their own, and the timid cannot retreat at will. This is the method for effectively commanding an army. Thus, in night battles, fires should be lit in many places and drums beaten frequently. In daytime combat, flags and banners should be deployed widely. These serve to confuse and mislead the enemy's sight and hearing. Against the enemy troops, this can weaken their morale. Against enemy commanders, it can shake their resolve. Reflections. This is Sun Tzu's discourse on psychological warfare. Sun Tzu believed that breaking the enemy's morale and shaking the confidence of its commanders is key to defeating the opponent. As Napoleon once said, the strength of an army is composed of 3/4 morale. War is not merely a contest of physical force, but also a battle of spirit and will. An army that has lost its morale is incapable of fighting. Therefore, Sun Tzu emphasized the importance of employing various psychological tactics to pressure the enemy, undermine their morale, and shake their resolve, defeating them mentally before engaging them physically, thereby stripping them of their fighting capacity. A classic example is Xiang Yu's defeat at Gaixia, where one of the key reasons for his loss was the collapse of morale among the Chu army. In the winter of the 5th year of Emperor Gaozu of Han, 202 BC, Liu Bang appointed Han Xian as king of Qi and Peng Yu as king of Liang. Together, they gathered a force of 300,000 troops and surrounded Xiang Yu at Gaixia. In the depths of winter, with fierce northern winds blowing, the Chu soldiers were cold and starving, filled with complaints and discontent. At this time, Zhang Liang arranged for mournful Chu songs to be sung outside the enemy camp, accompanied by sorrowful flute music. Hearing these familiar tunes, the Chu soldiers were overwhelmed with homesickness for their parents, wives, and children. Many wept in silence, lost their will to fight, and began to flee in all directions. Even loyal generals like Ji Bu and Zhong Liamo, who had followed Xiang Yu for years, deserted him in secret. Xiang Yu's beloved consort Yu Ji performed a sorrowful farewell dance, singing, "The Han troops have taken the land." From all sides comes the sound of Chu songs. "My lord's spirit is broken. How can your poor concubine go on living?" With that, she drew her sword and took her own life. Chaos gripped the army. Xiang Yu attempted to break through to the south, but was pursued to the banks of the Wu River by Han troops. Realizing escape was impossible, he took his own life with his sword. In the end, it was the sorrowful Chu songs that sapped the morale of the Chu army and hastened its downfall. 6. Avoiding the enemy's peak momentum. At the beginning of a battle, morale is high, but it gradually wanes and eventually turns to exhaustion. Therefore, a skilled commander avoids the enemy's initial surge of vigor and waits to strike when the opponent grows weary and lacks. This is the method of managing troop morale. Reflections. Morale is the concentrated expression of an army's spirit and will. High morale is a key factor in determining a military force's combat effectiveness. Therefore, Sun Tzu believed that a wise commander should avoid engaging the enemy when their morale is at its peak, and instead launch an offensive when their spirits are low. Only then can one gain a true advantage. In the 10th year of Duke Zhuang of Lu's reign, 684 BC, during the spring and autumn period, the state of Qi launched an attack on the state of Lu. Duke Zhuang prepared to go to war, but at that moment, a man named Chao Gui requested an audience. Duke Zhuang, being a virtuous ruler, agreed to meet him promptly, assuming that anyone asking to speak before battle must have something important to say. When Chao Gui entered, he first saluted the Duke and then inquired about the justification for going to war. Duke Zhuang replied, "When it comes to food and clothing, the things necessary for life, I have never kept them for myself. I always share them with my ministers." In other words, as a ruler, he cared not only for himself, but also for those around him. Chao Gui responded, "Such small favors do not reach the common people. Without their support, they will not fight sincerely for you." Duke Zhuang added, "When we perform sacrificial rites, I never exaggerate the offerings of livestock, jade, or silk. I always report the truth to heaven." In other words, he was honest and did not try to deceive the divine. Chao Gui replied, "Minor honesty like that will not win the favor of the gods. They will not bless you." The Duke then said, "As for legal matters, though I may not be able to judge every case personally, I always ensure that verdicts are fair and based on the truth." This meant he governed justly and without favoritism. Chao Gui nodded and said, "That is the true duty of a ruler. Based on this, it is worth fighting. If you go to war, allow me to accompany you." Duke Zhuang and Chao Gui then rode in the same chariot to face the Qi army at a place called Changshao. As soon as Duke Zhuang saw the enemy, he wanted to order the drums to signal an attack. But Chao Gui stopped him, saying, "Not yet." The Qi army beat their war drums 3 times. After the 3rd round, Chao Gui said, "Now we can strike." The Lu army attacked and defeated Qi decisively. Duke Zhuang wanted to order a pursuit immediately, but Chao Gui said, "Not yet." He got off the chariot and examined the tracks of the Qi army's wheels, then climbed back up, holding the crossbar of the chariot to observe the enemy's formation. Only then did he say, "Now we may pursue," and they chased down the Qi forces. After the victory, Duke Zhuang asked Chao Gui how they had won. Chao Gui replied, "Victory in battle depends on morale. When the first drum beats, the troops' spirits rise. By the second, they start to weaken. By the third, their morale is nearly gone. Their morale was depleted while ours was at its peak. That's why we won." Qi is a powerful state, and their tactics can't be underestimated. At first, I feared they had laid a trap. But then, I saw the wheel tracks were chaotic, and their flags had fallen. Only then did I give the order to pursue. The victory at the Battle of Changshao was largely due to Duke Zhuang's willingness to heed advice. Chao Gui followed a strategy of holding back to counterattack, striking the enemy when they were weary, and responding with restraint and precision. By seizing the right moment to counter and pursue, he firmly took control of the battlefield and led Lu to a major military victory. 7. Meet disorder with order, meet turmoil with calm. Confront the enemy's disorder with your own discipline. Meet their agitation with your calm. This is how to master a commander's mindset. Let your troops reach the battlefield from nearby, while the enemy must march a great distance. Use rested, orderly soldiers to confront exhausted, disorganized ones. Face hungry enemies with well-fed troops. This is how to command combat effectiveness. Do not attack enemies with well-aligned banners or neat formations. This is understanding the art of strategic flexibility. Reflections. The strategic principles such as wait for disorder with order, wait for noise with calm, wait for the distant with the near, wait for the weary with the rested, and wait for the hungry with the well-fed all reflect Sun Tzu's psychological approach to warfare. At its core is the concept of controlling morale, both maintaining one's own and undermining the enemy's. In warfare, the first priority is to maintain order within one's own ranks. Whether in attack or defense, a disciplined and composed army can exploit the chaos of an unorganized enemy. Sun Tzu believed that a skilled general should not only maintain order within his own forces, but also create disorder among the enemy. Even a large army is weak if its morale is fractured and its leadership confused. Victory, then, can be achieved by seizing the opportunity presented by enemy disorder. An example from the late Eastern Han Dynasty illustrates this well. As warlords battled for control, Gong Sun Kong, governor of Liaodong, remained relatively safe in his corner of the realm. However, he knew that if the Central Plains were unified, he might be the next target. After the defeat of Yuan Shao at the Battle of Guandu, Cao swiftly took control of 4 northern provinces. Yuan Shao's sons, Yuan Shang and Yuan Shi, fled to Gong Sun Kong for refuge. Though Kong hesitated to host them, fearing both their ambitions and Cao's reaction, he temporarily kept them under watch. In 207 BCE, after Cao defeated the Wu Huan, some advisors urged him to strike Liaodong and capture the Yuan brothers. But Cao wisely declined, saying, "There's no need to raise an army. Gong Sun Kong will send me their heads." True to prediction, fearing Cao might attack using the Yuan brothers as a pretext, Gong Sun Kong executed them and sent their heads to Cao within days. Without lifting a sword, Cao neutralized a threat and secured Liaodong. His success lay in waiting calmly amidst chaos and understanding the psychological tension between Kong and the Yuan brothers. Had he attacked, he would have united his enemies against him in his exhausted state, risking defeat. Instead, by holding back, he let suspicion and fear destroy his enemies from within. Sun Tzu would have called this using stillness to overcome turbulence. 8. Never press a desperate foe. Do not attack an enemy holding the high ground. Do not confront an enemy with their back to a hill. Do not fall for a feigned retreat. Do not strike elite troops at their peak. Do not take the bait of enemy tricks. Do not block an enemy returning home. Always leave an escape route to a surrounded enemy. Never push a desperate opponent to the brink. This is the true law of warfare. Reflections. Sun Tzu outlined 8 key military principles. Do not attack an enemy on high ground. Do not oppose an enemy with a hill at their back. Do not pursue a feigned retreat. Do not strike elite troops. Do not take bait. Do not block a retreating army. Always leave an escape route to a besieged force. And do not press a desperate foe. These principles are meant to help commanders recognize battlefield conditions, understand enemy tactics, and respond accordingly to restrain and overcome the opposition. A brilliant example of applying these principles was Fu Yong, a renowned general of the Northern Wei during the Southern and Northern dynasties. Fu Yong, courtesy name Xiuqi, was a native of Qinghe in modern-day Hebei province. From a young age, he displayed remarkable physical prowess and courage, famously able to ride upside down on a galloping horse. However, he initially lacked academic discipline and ignored advice to study. Embarrassed by his inability to write a proper reply to a friend's letter and stern rebuke from his uncle, Fu Yong resolved to educate himself. He became well-versed in classical texts and military strategy, combining intellect with his natural bravery. During the reign of Emperor Xiaowen of Northern Wei, Fu Yong served under Wang Su, governor of Yuzhou, as General Jianwu and chief clerk of Southern Pacification. Admiring Fu Yong's abilities and seniority, Wang Su treated him with great respect, and the two developed a deep mutual trust. When the Southern Qi Emperor Gao sent generals Lu Kangzu and Zhao Gongzheng to attack Yuzhou with a force of 10,000 men, Wang Su tasked Fu Yong with leading just 3,000 troops to counter them. Outnumbered and facing a grave threat, Fu Yong knew brute force would not win, only strategy could. The armies encamped on opposite sides of the Huai River. Fu Yong, well acquainted with the tactics of Wu and Chu forces, anticipated a night raid on his camp. He set a clever ambush by splitting his forces and leaving a decoy camp. He also predicted the enemy would mark their crossing point with fire for a nighttime retreat. He sent soldiers ahead to the southern bank with gourds filled with kindling and had them hide at a deep, fast-flowing stretch of the river. Their orders: light the gourds when enemy fires were spotted. That night, as expected, the Qi generals led their troops across the river for a surprise attack. Discovering the empty camp, they realized too late it was a trap. Fu Yong launched a pincer ambush. In panic, the Qi soldiers tried to flee back across the river, but misled by Fu Yong's decoy fires, rushed into deep waters and were drowned or slaughtered. Thousands perished, including Lu Kangzu. His body was later recovered and beheaded. Zhao Gongzheng was captured alive and sent to the capital with Lu's head as proof of victory. Not long after, southern Qi again attacked, this time sending Pei Shai, Wang Maoxian, and Li Ding to strike King Cheng of Chu, modern-day northwest Xinjiang, Hunan. Fu Yong was again sent to defend. He first sent a messenger to order the filling of trenches outside the city and deployed 1,000 men in ambush. When Pei Shai's army arrived and began encirclement, Fu Yong's hidden troops struck the rear, causing confusion. Pei led elite troops to reinforce his flank, but Fu Yong seized the moment to launch a full assault from the city. The enemy, caught mid-deployment and scattered, collapsed quickly. Though urged by his men to pursue the retreating army, Fu Yong refused, saying, "Our army is small, not even 3,000 men, and the enemy is still strong and numerous. Their defeat was not due to weakness, but because they fell into my trap and don't yet know our actual strength. If we pursue too far, we may suffer losses. Today's victory is enough, more is unnecessary." Fu Yong's repeated victories against superior forces were rooted in one thing: wisdom. He understood both himself and the enemy and wielded flexible tactics with precision, exactly as Sun Tzu taught.